So I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview here. And what I'm going to actually focus on the most is the ways that we can analyze population pyramids, because that's what's going to ask you about on the exam. That's the hardest part, right? Like, you can memorize how to label one of these things, but what you really need to understand is how to use it and what you can learn from it. And that's what tends to kind of throw students off. So one of the ways that we can analyze populations is through population pyramids. It helps us to see who lives in a society. So you can have a population pyramid for any region. It could be a city, it could be a state, it could be a country, it could be the whole world. This is the population pyramid for the entire world. So just to give you a quick sense of like what's even going on here, there's a lot of pieces of data that it's telling us. All right, so it's telling us age. So it's breaking down the population by age. And so it's showing based on, each line on the chart is showing you about how many people live are that age group, right? So up at the top, that's where you got old people. Up at the bottom, that's where you got kids. That's the children. You can also see gender on here as well. So you see how it's split from male and female. So, but just by looking at this, you can see that, there are less 80-year-olds than there are 3-year-olds in the entire world, right? And that there's implications for that. The other thing that it shows you is everyone in the middle here is economically active. So that means, or theoretically economically active, right? There's other reasons why someone might not work, but all the people at the bottom, kids, and all the people at the top, the oldest of our population, these two groups depend on everyone in the middle, everyone right in here, right? These are the people who are taking care of the older generations and the younger generations. So these people, the more, if you have a society where there are more people at the top and at the bottom than there are working, that can be a problem. All right, so that's called dependency ratio. All right, let's just check really quick. Could you please repeat where the line about agriculture is? And how do we know if the population pyramids are accurate? Okay, so the line where agriculture is, let me just go back really quick to this slide here. So agriculture tends to thrive like in this region here that's like, I forget the exact number, but it's a certain number of like maybe like 20, 30-ish degrees above the equator and 30 degrees below. So that like band across the world tends to be the best like place for agriculture. And if you actually map out the early societies, like early civilizations, like Egypt, Mesopotamia, all those early ones, almost all of them are in that band because that's where agriculture does the best. Okay. How do we know if the population pyramids are accurate? It's an interesting question. So, like any data set, it's good to question, like, where does this data come from? I think, it depends on kind of where you get them. This one, all the ones I'm going to show you tonight, almost all the ones I'm going to show you are from populationpyramid.net, which is actually a really cool website that I'm going to put in the chat because I already pulled out a bunch of them that I'm going to show you tonight, and we're going to talk about them. But you can actually see, you can click on any country in the world and any time period. And so, remember that this is just showing you, it's just showing you data. It's just showing you like how many people there are. So it's not making any assumptions about those people. It's just showing you that. And then you can use this to make those assumptions. So the assumptions themselves could be incorrect. They could be correct. But the data is based on, census data. It's based on any type of like way that we can count people, right? So taxes, anything like that. So it's pretty, accurate. Okay. Done answering. All right. So boom, boom, boom. Okay. So lots of information is coming from these pyramids, right? And I think it's easy enough to just kind of like know the basics of it, that the children at the bottom, it's showing you age, it's showing you how many people, and there's just sort of that axis in the middle that's at like 0. So each one is kind of jutting out on its own. So what can you actually learn from population pyramids? There's a lot of things that you can learn, and you definitely need to know what each of these terms are. So something I talked about last week with human geography is this class is very vocabulary heavy. So there are other APs that are very like skill heavy. Those would be like the histories, probably the math classes, right? Where you like really have to know how to do things. In human geography, and which is similar to like almost like psychology, it's vocabulary. Like the best thing you can do in studying for this class is to just straight up learn the vocab, right? Just learn it. You just got to kind of memorize some of the stuff and then apply it. So we're going to apply these things. Okay. So in terms of population pyramids, there's really like 5 things that I've highlighted here, and probably other things too that you can learn from population pyramids. One of those things is just the size of dependent populations. So that's what's called like a dependency ratio. That's what I talked about here. So if this section here, the people in the middle, the people that are working, if that is bigger than the older people and the younger people, that's good, right? They can keep those people, alive and healthy. If there are more dependents, that can be a stress on the population. So that it's showing you dependency ratio. You can see when a society has, a dependency ratio that is not equal. If there's more people to depend on. The second thing you can see is like birth rates and death rates. So as you look at population pyramids, this bottom piece here will show you birth rates, right? It's not going to necessarily show you like the number. It's not going to say like in the world the birth rate is and then some number, but you can see in relation to other ages and just a general, like if it's long, the birth rate is high. If it's short, the birth rate is small, right? So in the world, it's, this is the world, so it's kind of hard to like depict this one or a relative number, but birth rates are coming out of this bottom piece here, and death rates are coming out of this top piece here. So you can see like, just in general how long people live. I think that's what I had for the second. Oh, that's number 4. The third thing that you can see is the gender makeup in the society. So, obviously we've got male, we've got female, and I think it's always the males are on the left, the females are on the right. So you can see the gender makeup in a society. And sometimes, there's more males than females or more females than males, and in a particular age range. And you can attribute war, migrations, either of those things would affect that, right? So if you look at, even here, of 80-year-olds in the world, there are more women. That's probably just like a biological, women live longer. But in some countries, when you look at them, you can see that there are more females than males of a certain age range. And if you know the history, you know that there was a war that those people were like 20 years old for, right? And so more men died because they fought in the war. Therefore, today, there's more 80-year-old women. Or migrations. Migrants tend to be male. So if there's a period of migrations to a country, you're going to see more males in that country. Or if they're emigrating from the country, you're going to see more females there. So you can see the gender makeup and you can make assumptions about those. You can apply history. You can apply, just an understanding of like what happened to explain why. The other piece of so life expectancy. So in this case, you can see that like the life expectancy in the world, right? Like, people live as old as in their 90s, like globally. And it can kind of show you like in less developed societies, the whole pyramid tends to be shorter because they're not living as long because of a lack of medicine, a lack of education, all kinds of different factors. So you can see that from population pyramids. And the last thing is that size of economically active populations, right? So in a society with more people in the middle, they're more economically active. That means that's good for the economy. That's good for, trade and growth. Okay, so there's basically 3 different shapes of population pyramids that all of them fit into. All right, So let me just make sure that goes away. So in terms of the three shapes, the first one is always like a triangle. This is for developing nations. So these are nations that most of the developing nations today are in Africa or in Asia, and sometimes in South America. And so these countries are like not fully industrialized. They're developing. They're what we call or have called before like third world countries. We don't really use that term anymore. We say developing. And these countries tend to have high birth rates, right? So that bottom base is long. You can see there's a lot of babies being born. The reason for that is because there's generally some sort of lack of birth control. And so people have a lot of children. And so the second thing is that they have generally low life expectancy. So it tends to be short, where, most people are not living super long. And then lastly is that it's slow growth rates. Like the overall population of these countries is not growing all that fast. And that has to do with too many babies and a high infant mortality rate because of lack of medicine. So the fact that there's all these babies being born, but a lot of them are not surviving past infancy is affecting the population growth. The second type of population pyramid you can see is kind of a rectangle. So in this one, this is like developed countries. So an example here would be the US. The US population pyramid looks kind of similar to that. It's just kind of boxy. So in that type of society, there's low infant mortality, right? The birth rate isn't very high. It's pretty like stable. People are living much longer, but there's also like slow growth in that too. They're not growing super fast. And then the last one is sort of like inverted, right? So what in the last version, the problem is that you have way more older people than younger people. And so it's actually negative growth. Their population size is declining. It's because people are dying and not a lot are being born. And so in Japan, you see this where like there are too many there are way more people who are older than there are children. Okay. All right. So again, drop your questions in, hit the chat, if you have any questions about the three types of population pyramids. So I'm just going to show you the three countries that I just talked about. So Namibia, this is the population pyramid for Namibia. Namibia has about 2.5 million people that live there, and this is how they break down. Right. So you can see it's, the life expectancy in Namibia is not that high. It's, it kind of trails off after 60, right? Like people live longer. Like it's not like everyone just dies, but generally there's just a pretty low life expectancy, and the birth rates are massive, right? Like this bottom base is huge, and then it, you look at this like jump, right? It's like, where do all those children go, right? Like we don't have way less 5 to 9 year olds than we do 0 to 4. That's because of a high infant mortality rate. And then as they kind of go up, you can just kind of see the differences here. This is the US. So the US has a population of about 326 million people. And you can see here, it's more of the like rectangles, more boxy. The birth rates in the US, like the size of this line is pretty close to the size of, this line. We have a similar number of like, 65-year-olds as we do infants. So they're, and you can see here, like, look at the difference between this bottom piece here. The infant mortality rate in the US is not very high. So, you can see, whereas here, look at the difference between these two lines. Here, it doesn't change. These kids are staying alive more. Okay, so this one is Japan. So just like we talked about that like inverted one, right? This inversion here. Here's where you can see the birth rates, and you can see how there's way more people who are older. And so that poses like all new issues in the society, because how do all these people in the middle take care of the older populations?